1. The illusion of the self. When you wake up in the morning and catch your reflection in the mirror, it feels so obvious that there is a you sitting behind those eyes. The voice in your head, the center of perspective, the quiet narrator that seems to weave everything into a single stream of consciousness. This is the self, the feeling of an inner owner who commands the body and thinks the thoughts. This sense of self feels ancient, unshakable, and unquestionable. Without it, how would you even begin to live? And yet, for thousands of years, philosophers, mystics, and more recently scientists have suspected that this self may not actually exist in the way we assume. That what you feel as me is not a solid entity behind your eyes, but a clever construction. A story told so convincingly that you forget it's a story at all. Think about what happens when you try to locate your eye. Close your eyes for a moment and search. Where exactly is this self? Is it behind your eyes? In the center of your head? Somewhere in your chest? The longer you look, the more slippery it becomes. You find thoughts, sensations, memories, emotions, but never the thinker, never the owner. The self seems obvious when you aren't paying attention, but the moment you look for it, it evaporates. This is the illusion of the self, the deep, persistent feeling that there is a stable you inside, even though no such thing can be found. Our ancestors struggled with this illusion long before neuroscience gave us brain scans or experiments. In ancient India, the sages of the Upanishads wrote about the Atman, the self beyond the body and mind, but later traditions like Buddhism rejected even that. They spoke of anatta, no self, the idea that what we call the self is simply a bundle of processes, sensations arising, thoughts flickering, perception shifting moment by moment. Like a flame, always appearing continuous but never the same fire twice. Meanwhile, in the West, philosophers puzzled over the same mystery. Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," placing thought at the core of identity. But David Hume looked inward and found something different. He searched for the self and found only a collection of perceptions, like beads on a string without the string. For Hume, the self was not a thing, but a bundle, a pattern mistaken for an essence. Centuries later, neuroscience would begin to confirm what these ancient voices suggested. What we think of as a single self is actually the output of countless neural processes, running in parallel, competing, cooperating, and stitching together a coherent narrative after the fact. The brain is less a command center than a parliament, with different voices constantly arguing, negotiating, and sometimes contradicting one another. But if the self is an illusion, why is it so convincing? Part of the answer lies in survival. Imagine if every morning you woke up with no memory of who you were, no thread tying your experiences together. Life would be impossible. So the brain does something ingenious. It builds a model, a simplified story of continuity, and places it at the center of experience. This is me, the story says. I was here yesterday. I will be here tomorrow. I am the one making these choices. Whether or not that's true, believing it keeps the organism alive and functioning. Consider language. The grammar of thought itself is structured around I want. I feel, I remember. Each statement reinforces the sense of a central subject. Without it, communication would collapse. In a way, the illusion of self is not just an internal trick. It is baked into the very way we use words, the way we tell stories, the way culture transmits meaning. And culture plays a powerful role. From childhood, you are taught to see yourself as a distinct person with a name, a history, and a future. This is your body, you are told. This is your toy. These are your achievements. You are praised for being independent, scolded for stepping out of line, and gradually trained to feel as though you are a single, separate entity. This training is so deep that to question it later in life feels absurd, even dangerous. But cracks in the illusion reveal themselves if you look carefully. Think of moments when you are completely absorbed in something, a sport, a conversation, a work of art, even just staring at the sunset. In those moments, the sense of I fades away. There is only the doing, the perceiving, the flow. Hours pass unnoticed. And when you return, you realize that the self was absent, and yet everything functioned just fine without it. Or consider dreams. In a dream, you may be a different person entirely, another age, another gender, another story. You rarely question it. The self adapts instantly, wearing whatever mask the dream provides. Only upon waking do you see how fluid and fragile that identity really was. So the illusion of the self is not simply a philosophical puzzle. It is a lived experience, a trick of consciousness that has shaped every civilization, every religion, every war and act of love. For if the self is real and solid, then we must defend it, glorify it, build monuments to it. But if the self is not what it seems, then perhaps our deepest conflicts, between people, between nations, even within ourselves, are built upon shadows. Still, it is not easy to let go of the self. Even when you understand intellectually that it is an illusion, the feeling persists. The brain keeps telling the story, keeps stitching together memories and sensations into the appearance of an owner. To see through the illusion requires not just knowledge, but a change in perception. And that is where practices like meditation, contemplation, and self-inquiry come in. They are less about adopting new beliefs and more about testing experience directly. Sitting quietly, watching thoughts arise and fade, you may start to see that none of them belong to you. They appear, they vanish, and yet awareness remains. The I that you thought was pulling the strings is just another thought, another appearance within awareness. The ancient illusion of the self is powerful, but it is not unbreakable. To glimpse beyond it is not to lose yourself, but to discover something subtler. The open field of consciousness in which all selves come and go. Like clouds drifting across the sky, each identity has its time, but the sky itself is not touched. And so we return to that familiar face in the mirror. You look, and it looks back. You say, that is me. But if you pause, if you question, if you look a little deeper, you may find that the one behind your eyes is not what you thought. The self is a story, but awareness, the one who hears the story, may be something far more mysterious. 2. Experiments and neuroscience. Imagine for a moment that your mind is not a single unified voice, but a chorus. Not one conductor standing tall at the center, but a crowd of different instruments, each competing to be heard, each playing its own tune. For most of your life, this orchestra blends into what feels like a single melody, your consciousness. But science, through a series of strange and sometimes unsettling experiments, has shown us that this melody is not nearly as seamless as it appears. One of the most dramatic windows into this mystery comes from the phenomenon of the split brain. In the mid-20th century, surgeons trying to treat severe epilepsy discovered that by severing the corpus callosum, the thick band of fibers that connects the brain's two hemispheres, they could reduce seizures. The surgery worked, but it also revealed something astonishing. Cutting that bridge between left and right didn't just quiet seizures. It created two streams of awareness inside a single skull. The patients who underwent this surgery seemed normal at first glance. They could walk, talk, joke, remember their families. But when researchers designed clever experiments, the cracks in their unity began to show. Because each half of the brain controls different halves of vision and motor function, information presented to one side often remained hidden from the other. A word shown only to the left visual field, for instance, would be processed by the right hemisphere. The patient's left hand could draw or point to what they saw, but when asked to say the word aloud, they often couldn't, because speech is controlled largely by the left hemisphere, which hadn't received the input. What does this mean? It means that the brain, the seat of our precious selfhood, is not a single indivisible unit. It can be split, and when it is, two centers of experience appear. Two partial selves, each with access to different information, each capable of making choices. In some cases, the two hands of a split-brain patient would even act in opposition. One hand buttoning a shirt while the other unbuttoned it. One hand pointing to an object the other denied seeing. So who is the real self in such a case? Which hemisphere holds the true person? The answer, unsettling as it may be, is that both are selves and neither is. The sense of a single I is stitched together by the communication between hemispheres. Sever that communication, and the illusion cracks open to reveal multiple selves coexisting in one body. This is not just a curiosity of neurosurgery. It suggests something deeper, that even in a normal brain, our sense of unity is a fragile construction. The mind is made up of countless modules, specialized circuits that evolved for different purposes. One system processes vision, another handles language, another generates emotions, another makes quick decisions under pressure. All of these systems work in parallel, often without full access to each other's workings. What we call consciousness may simply be the brain's way of binding these together into a coherent narrative. Think of it like a press secretary standing at a podium, explaining the government's policies. The secretary doesn't make the decisions. They don't control the countless agencies, debates, and conflicts behind the scenes. Their job is simply to present a tidy story to the public. In much the same way, the self you feel may be a press secretary of the mind, narrating after the fact, smoothing over contradictions, and presenting you with the illusion of control. Other experiments reinforce this view. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet asked subjects to move their wrists whenever they felt like it, while he measured brain activity. What he found was startling. The brain showed a readiness potential, a buildup of electrical activity, hundreds of milliseconds before the subjects reported the conscious decision to move. In other words, the brain had already begun the process of moving before you became aware of choosing to move. This discovery raised profound questions about free will. If the decision is already underway before awareness catches up, then what is the role of the conscious self? Are we truly in control, or are we simply rationalizing choices after the brain has already made them? Later studies complicated Libet's findings, but the basic point remained. The conscious self is not the origin of action. At best, it is a commentator arriving late to the scene, and yet the illusion persists. You feel as though you chose to raise your hand, to speak a word, to fall in love, to change careers. The narrative of self insists on being the author, even when science shows it is more of a witness. Why does the brain go to such lengths to preserve this illusion? Because unity has survival value. If the brain revealed all of its divisions, if every module insisted on its independence, you would collapse into confusion. You'd be paralyzed by inner conflict, unable to act. The illusion of a unified self smooths over these fractures, allowing you to function as though you were one being. But beneath that surface harmony, there is constant competition. Consider addiction. One part of you wants to quit smoking. Another part craves the cigarette. One part of you commits to the gym. Another part wants to sleep in. These are not mere metaphors. They are neural systems pulling in different directions. The self you feel is the uneasy compromise, the story told after the struggle. Think of dreams again. In a dream, you may find yourself in a completely different world, accepting it as real until you wake. Which self was dreaming? Which self is awake? Are they the same? Or are they two different theaters of consciousness, stitched together only by memory? And so, the science of split brains and readiness potentials doesn't just reveal curiosities about the brain. It points to something profound, that the self is not one thing, but many, and that what feels like a unified I is an afterimage, a narrative woven from countless voices. The orchestra is always playing, but the conductor may be more of a myth than a reality. If you let this sink in, it can feel destabilizing. To think that your precious sense of self, the voice that says, I am here, I am in charge, is not in charge at all, is not even singular, but an echo of deeper processes you do not control. But destabilizing as it is, it can also be liberating, for if the self is not the commander, then perhaps you are not bound by its illusions. Perhaps you can step back, notice the chorus of voices, and discover that awareness itself, the silent witness, is larger than anyone's story. Science, in its cold, clinical way, has illuminated a truth that mystics whispered centuries ago. The self is not a king on a throne, but a chorus of servants. And the one who sees all of this, the awareness in which the chorus arises, is not the self at all. 3. Memory and the continuity of identity. If identity is not anchored in a single self inside the skull, then what holds it together? For most of us, the answer seems obvious: memory. We believe we are the same person today that we were yesterday because we remember yesterday. We carry our past like a thread that ties each moment to the next, weaving continuity out of time. But what if that thread is not as strong or as trustworthy as it seems? Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus showed how fragile memory really is. In her experiments, participants were led to believe events had happened in their childhood, events that never took place. Over time, many of them recalled these false moments with striking detail: the color of clothing, the sound of laughter, even the emotions they felt. These weren't lies. The memories felt as real as any other. The mind, it turns out, is not a recorder of truth, but a storyteller, editing and embellishing each time we recall. Think about what that means. The events you are most certain of, your happiest day, your worst mistake, the face of a loved one, may not be what you think. Each time you revisit them, they shift, like sandcastles reshaped by the tide. Memory doesn't preserve the self. It rebuilds it again and again, like a play rewritten each time it is staged. Sleep deepens the mystery. Every night the thread of self is cut. Hours pass in which you are gone, no memories, no identity. Then you wake, gather the fragments, and carry on as though nothing happened. You trust that the you who wakes is the same as the one who fell asleep. But what bridges the gap if not memory? And if memory is unreliable, how stable is the self that depends on it? Philosophy has long suspected this. The Buddhist doctrine of anatta, or no self, describes identity as a flame. It appears continuous, but in truth it is sustained only by changing fuel. Neuroscience now echoes this view. The self is not a solid object carried through time, but a process, assembled moment by moment, glued together by recollection. So when you say, "I know who I am," what you really mean is, "I know the story my memory tells," but stories are fragile. They can be altered, forgotten, or erased. And if your sense of self rests on such shifting ground, perhaps the deeper question is not who you were, but what is aware of the story being told right now. Philosophy and spiritual traditions. Long before neuroscience split brains and measured readiness potentials, ancient traditions were wrestling with the same riddle. What is the self? They did not use electrodes or brain scans, but they looked inward with relentless precision. What they found often sounds startlingly similar to what modern science now suggests, that the I you cling to is not a fixed entity at all, but something more like a mask worn for a while, then set aside. Buddhism called it anatta, no self. The Buddha observed that what we call a person is a collection of processes, sensations, thoughts, emotions, intentions. None of them stay. Each arises, peaks, and dissolves, just as clouds form and scatter in the sky. The mind insists on weaving these into a continuous me, but if you look closely, there is no core behind the weave, only the weaving itself. Vedanta, a branch of Hindu philosophy, spoke of a deeper witness beneath the masks. The Atman was not the personality, not the shifting memories, but the pure awareness in which they all appeared. The Upanishads compared it to the light of the sun. It does not change with the shapes it illuminates. Your identity as child, lover, parent, or elder may rise and fall, but the witnessing presence remains untouched. Sufi mysticism described something similar as the face of God hidden beneath every appearance. The ego, they said, is like a costume, necessary for moving through the play of life, but never the actor itself. Behind the veil of personality lies a shared, indivisible awareness. To recognize it is to taste freedom from fear, for what is boundless cannot be harmed. Even the Taoist sage Zhuangzi hinted at this mystery when he wondered whether he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. Identity, in his telling, was fluid, shifting, never ultimate. Modern neuroscience, in its own way, has circled back to the same insight. When researchers observe advanced meditators quiet the brain's default mode network, the circuit most tied to the sense of self, they see the illusion of separateness dissolve. What remains is not blankness, but a radiant awareness without center or boundary, echoing what the mystics described centuries ago. The point is not that science and spirituality are saying exactly the same thing, but that they converge on a striking truth: the self you defend, protect, and polish is far less solid than you believe. It is a passing mask, a role in a play, a story whispered in awareness. The deeper you search for the one wearing the mask, the more it slips away, and perhaps that is the beginning of wisdom, not clinging to the mask, nor destroying it, but seeing it clearly for what it is, a temporary face, shimmering in the vastness of awareness. What remains beyond the self? When every mask is removed, when memory is revealed as fragile and the sense of control dissolves, something remains. Even as the story of me flickers and fades, there is still awareness, silent, steady, unshaken. This awareness is not a thought or a memory. It is not the voice in your head, nor the image in the mirror. It is the open space in which all of those arise. Think of it this way. You have never actually seen your own face. Only reflections, photographs, shadows. You have never truly heard your own voice. Only its echo bounced back through air and machines. In the same way, you have never found the self you believe is behind your eyes. You only encounter stories, images, and memories. Yet through all of them, awareness is present. Awareness does not change when your body grows older, when your opinions shift, when your memories rewrite themselves. It was here when you were a child, and it is here now. It is the same open field in which joy and heartbreak, silence and noise, dreams and waking have all appeared. Like the sky, it is untouched by the storms that pass through it. Mystics gave it many names. In Vedanta, it is Satchitananda, being consciousness bliss. Zen called it original mind. The Sufis spoke of it as the face of the divine. Science, more cautious, simply observes that when the brain's chatter quiets, the sense of a separate self fades, leaving behind only pure, centerless awareness. Whatever you call it, the point is the same. What you truly are is not the story, but the stage. This recognition changes everything. If you are not confined to the small flickering self, then the fear of its loss softens. The boundaries that separate you from others begin to dissolve. The same awareness that shines through your eyes shines through every being. One light, countless lamps. One ocean, countless waves. You are not the actor trapped in the play. You are the light by which the play is seen. You are not the thinker of thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts come and go. You are not the one behind your eyes. You are the awareness in which eyes and world and self all appear. And when that is seen clearly, the story of me becomes just that, a story. Beautiful, temporary, and not the whole truth. What remains is the silent witness, timeless and boundless. What remains is what you have always been.